You can see there is actually an unfolded background shit, but we're trying, be patient. We're gonna afford the real world soon. Here with me there is
almost afford to get it all the way into the camera.
with me there is Barton Johnson, but we have in fact a surprise. You can see the full extent of our attempt to a studio now. From a very high camera, there is the direction part on the other side. We have a teleprompter here. There are many other things that are going to be deployed soon. But let's go back to the two of us. Let's actually give us a name. I am Roberto Capodieci. There you have Mr. Barton
Johnston.
Okay. Well.
We have some fantastic material prepared
Oh
for
my
you
god,
today.
we prepared for this
Didn't sleep all night.
for a week. Now, and we are here totally unprepared. So for you, in fact, if you write a comment, we may be able even to read what you want from us and respond. But this apart,
we can address a question that we got last time. Actually, did you go and read the question that we got last time? I did.
I did too.
Yeah?
Yes.
Oh, so you're maybe we can address the point. Somebody asked us, is blockchain a decent technology to try to build a decentralized antivirus system? So that's a thing. Yeah, I don't know. Do you want to engage with that topic? We can let's start with how an antivirus vault typically works, right? So if you have everybody has antivirus software on their computer, or should. This is, like the annoying McAfee or Windows Defender thing that pops up on your laptop all the time and says you're insecure. Essentially, the way that a thing like this works is it's a kind of a dumb brute force strategy, but it works okay, which is that they keep a big database of hashes of files that they can find on your system. And this virus scanner, periodically, is going to scan every file in your computer from top to bottom, looking into every subfolder and whatever, and compare these files that it has to this set of hashes that it actually has collected in the vault. And it's going to try to it's going to check and see, is any of these a virus file that we've recognized in the past? Somebody in the background at the company is updating this vault. Every time they identify a new virus, they throw this set of file hashes into the vault. And that's why this thing has to update like every day or every other day to pick up all the new hashes that have been injected into the database. And in theory, this thing will tell you when any file on your computer belongs to a virus.
You use cryptography in a way. It creates hashes of particular part of application, so where the virus inject a full application, if it's a non-full application that is infected with virus, and compare the hash of the application with the hash in its database, right? This is interesting, and is a method that is not only used in antivirus. For example, to verify if a computer contains child pornography, non-child pornography, without exposing anybody to the site of this, take a person, go through 10,000 pictures, look them one by one and evaluate if something is child pornography. The hard drive in question gets scanned, every file that is in there, doesn't matter if it is a picture or not, because somebody can hide the picture under other format file, gets scanned, a hash is made of each of those, and is compared with the large database that law enforcement share that has all the hashes of the known child pornography pictures. If there is a match, is very much a guarantee that the hard drive contains child pornography. That's a very interesting and fast and effective method to distribute the known child pornography to all the law enforcement without actually distribute the child pornography, but just the mathematical hash extracted by them. Antivirus use the same method, and many other particular method of search engines, so file organization, do these sort of things to speed up for example, you are going to upload a large file on the cloud or on online drive. They can calculate the hash of your file before it's gone, with the list of hashes that there are there, automatically avoid you to do all the bandwidth for uploading a file because there is already a match. Or when multiple people save the same file, it's saved and stored one single time, and so on and so forth. So Is database of hashes something that the blockchain can provide? And I think it's very good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think absolutely it can. I think the bigger question is why, in the antivirus case, would you want to do this? And so the very first thing that comes to my mind, what is blockchain good at? It's good at preventing one organization from having central control of what goes in the database. So what are the risks that we add moving it outside of a centralized control? So the one most obvious problem it can solve is, let's say that Norton actually, when you install the thing, it installs some virus files by itself or whatever. And obviously the database that they provide you is never going to check for their particular virus files. Maybe they got bribed or paid off by some kind of big like shadow gang, whatever it was called, to make sure that the antivirus never detects these things, or maybe by some even more shadowy government entity that their antivirus never detects particular files. On the downside, I give the other one also, if there's a mechanism for anybody in the world to register anything that they think is a virus file into this database, then you're going to get a whole lot of competing software houses registering enemy software as virus.
Which is actually happen.
Also.
Which is actually happen, absolutely. You consider this, government need the tools to spy and listen maybe a criminal organization, other things in order to collect proof to arrest them eventually, right? While it was easy in the past to listen a phone call because the operator was just adding a pair of headset and the police officers were taking notes, then eventually record the things. As soon as things became digital over the internet, it became hard to actually be a man in the middle, to put themselves in the middle and listen. So they do practically use viruses that are injected in people's computer to then listen. The problem is that if this virus is recognized by an antivirus, it is immediately deleted. So they need to pay attention to have something developed just for them and used with a lot of caution, so that is not something that propagate. They use what viruses usually do, they send themselves to other people and copy and paste. So hardly they end up being recognized, and it can be present in computer with antivirus. The antivirus goes through it and doesn't see anything wrong, unless they used library or functions in their software that are used by non-viruses, to which happen. Sometimes though, two different governments have interest to expose other government spyware, but not their own. If you look at the biggest antivirus company, represent the two sides of the things. The one are Russian, Kaspersky and other things. Other are America, McAfee, Norton, and so on. So it's interesting that nobody used the French antivirus, which probably is gonna stop you if you don't buy a baguette rather than right. And how they are pushed, and they're also business, they make money, and they're also very needed things. But there are virus signatures that are included in one which are not included in the other. It happens, if you notice, that this virus can be recognized by this antivirus and not by that. Why? Sometimes because it would also expose government viruses. Maybe somebody used the same library of the government viruses, but the country that interest the government virus doesn't expose, let go of the virus.
And I go ahead and say something dangerous, because while it might not be obvious to the vast majority of people, even virus creators, it's obvious to enough people that it's worth being cautious about, which is that this strategy of hashing the files to get a signature and then comparing to the database of hashes does not even prevent someone who is clever about creating a self-replicating virus. All you have to do is have the virus build a little bit of say you could put some memory in the executable file that's trash memory that you know the program is not going to touch, and every time before the virus replicates, it can add random crap in there. The hash is never going to match. You're never going to end up in the database.
There are systems to intercept this kind of virus as well, because heuristic searches go through different part of or perceiving codes or other things. But true enough, the big downside of a virus is that if it propagates to everybody, when it's very well propagated, people find it, see, analyze it, and eventually find a way to detect it. If it's mutable, gonna find a way. There must be some common instruction, something, some particular address or memory files that represent the infection of the virus. Because many attach to existing executables, so like it's not that they're an application on their own, which will be very easy to detect, right? So some inject or in library of the operating system or replace operating system files that
Yeah, exactly.
there are tons of different ways the virus I accidentally know very well to say. But once a virus is coded to be targeted to a specific objective or it replicates but doesn't do anything to cause damage. Let's think about Stuxnet, for example. Stuxnet is a virus that is very interesting. It's a very beautiful story in the virus.
I was going to talk about WannaCry, but Stuxnet I like even more.
WannaCry, yeah. They are the two opposite, as two examples. But Stuxnet had this thing. It was targeting exclusively the uranium.
Do you mind if I tell the story of Stuxnet a little bit? So, several years ago, there was this strange piece of software that I think was originally found in America in the computers that controlled traffic lights. And it was, and people were like, what? What is this? And it was, as they dug into it, it was an extremely complicated computer virus that targeted Windows XP. Which a lot of industrial systems in the world are still run on. And they dug in further and further, and this virus was one of the most sophisticated viruses ever developed. So they recognized that after a lot of analysis, it appeared as though half of the code was written in America and half of the code was written in Israel. And they realized that the payload of this virus, what it's built to do when it gets way inside the computer is, it looks for a very particular condition. It looks to see if the computer the virus is on is connected to a piece of control software that's used to control a very particular kind of uranium refinement centrifuge. And this virus would then very, very subtly tweak the behavior of the centrifuge, not to make it stop, or not to make it spin out of control and explode, but to make it spin just slightly out of it where its performance tested, so that over time, the thing would unnoticeably cause too much stress on itself and break down and need to be replaced. And so this was an example of real cyber warfare.
And being a very well-targeted virus, it took a long time to identify, find, and take action in regard, because it would not create damage, so people could be infected. Which remind me of the behavior of coronavirus, right? Which get into people. People don't show any sign of sickness, infection whatsoever, but then germs can still transmit, and before you become activated to give symptoms, you're already late because you already infected a lot of people. And if the coronavirus was selective in who attack, where it become dangerous and where not, then it would be very much the same
target.
Exactly. And who knows if with they cannot actually do something like this. And then would there be an international database of ashes of the DNA?
There is something like this used by virologists. I don't know if they use hashes, but they just compare the DNA strings directly.
But going back to the initial questions, then we can indulge into viruses, because it's a very interesting topic. Also, when it comes to blockchain, how a virus can affect the blockchain, or what are viruses coded to attack server in the internet compared to desktop or
imagine a virus that tries to spread and just alter the behavior of blockchain nodes, for example.
Let's get it. But going back to the beauty of using a blockchain as a database for hashes or strings to recognize viruses would be the fact that many people can participate to the same database from different countries. People can be authenticated, so there can be a KYC to know who registered a certain virus, connect the link to the research done, blah blah blah. There are already
some kind of reputation about which viruses they submitted that are real.
And the date when it happened, people cannot claim there was done before or after. If there is a reward, in the moment that, for example, I pay a fee of $10 per month for my antivirus, based on the virus that has been found in my computer, based the person that matched to the hash, the reward is distributed to those that find the viruses.
But incentive schemes are very, very tricky. We're very close to the territory that I create a virus and then I immediately register the hash
because
of
you
the
tell me
virus.
that this never happened, that viruses are created by those that sell the antivirus.
I said incentive schemes are dangerous. It's just as dangerous when they do it as when we do it.
But anyway, that's interesting because information that are publicly available and whose submission can be done pseudonymously have a very big power. So, uniting this thing about viruses, server on the internet, what is the definition of botnet? Botnet is a network, not even a network, but an ensemble of computers that have been infected by somebody with a virus. They still work normally, so they keep doing the things, but they respond to the command of this person.
Yeah.
People create botnet through weakness in software such as WordPress, rather than other application installed in server in the internet. People that don't update server, that there are open doors, they don't care what is inside the server. They need a machine to perform things. So botnet can be used to send a spam email.
Can be used to mine cryptocurrency.
They can be used to mine cryptocurrency, or they can be used to do denial of service attack. So when a single computer in the internet, is a web server or a personal computer or whatever, receive a request from hundreds of thousands of different sources, it's gonna crash, it's gonna go down.
For example, one of the famous botnets was called the low orbit ion cannon. And this was the analogy, in Star Wars, the Death Star, where they have the 6 beams that go pew, 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 and then it fires the huge laser, right? It's like a little bit
With
of
the same special effect, actually, the application to use.
It's a little bit the same kind of picture that so you manage to get the software running on 1,000 different computers, and all of them bombard the same target at the same time when they receive.
There's actually a particular application that make you part of the network as well.
I think so. Yeah.
It is
I think I'm confusing that one. The LOIC is when you install on purpose.
Correct. The control for this botnet is the centralized aspect of the botnet. So we're talking about decentralization at all. So I have an army of 10,000 servers around the internet that respond to me. I do damage with this, and people can come to me because they see which is the voice that send out the message to instruct this computer to do things. So what the smart people did, they start getting this software rather than receiving an instruction to go read tweet feeds, for example, rather than Instagram feeds, and following. So they have a behavior that any other, or million other people have. So it's very hard to detect the botnet that go read the Twitter feeds. But the instruction to execute a command, for example, to attack a particular IP address, is set as a comment, for example, under a picture in Instagram of a model. So they say, oh, I love, then there is strange number, other things. This button, go read the feed of the Instagram, see a message that can be sent by anybody with a particular string, and receive this as a command and start doing the attack, making the recipient. So blockchain has been used for this as well. People post a special transaction on a public blockchain
for a botnet,
and it contain encrypted
This is the equivalent of if you had, say, like somebody you knew was going to speak on TV, and they say a particular code word, and during their speech on TV, somebody out there in the country listening understands that this code word is the trigger to begin some operation, but nobody beyond that. You have no way to map. You can't go and find the list of every single person who was watching TV that day, who might have been the one to receive the instruction. It's
most of all, it is not a digital TV, but broadcasted television, right? So this is eventually a point of connection of the centralized systems that if you can imagine a successful blockchain, but many other things, but blockchain in the case where you have 10,000 nodes running, a software that is being implemented mostly by a few people only. This software may contain also
a backdoor
directly the instruction for to do an attack. They only respond when there is a transaction that we will never know if it's well hidden. Consider that the beautiful software is in 20 lines of code, people can understand fully everything, but the complex software becomes with thousands and thousands of lines of code, which are difficult to interpret in full. So it's very easy to hide the strange functionality inside, things that is done, unfortunately, very often, right?
Yeah. So in fact, we've been now through Stuxnet, through botnets a little bit. He's talking about these. We characterize the problem a little bit, the scope of the problem, because a botnet, the code that runs, is still a virus usually. In the sense that it replicates itself. And so, how would we? Let's play around with the idea. If we were going to structure a blockchain-based system to actually track this thing, how would we architect it? I think this is a cool conversation to have because there are a lot of people out there who are like the blockchain cranks, who like anything that you tell them, pick an item off a list. Oh yes, you can go on blockchain and you can use, and then they rattle off a bunch of buzzwords and that's the end of their explanation. But let's think carefully a little bit about how would you structure a solution like this in the real world?
A specialized blockchain to support antivirus database, so we should do more than just that. You have a fortune to have a very distributed, decentralized, belonging to different network set of computer. They have the chance to listen what is happening in the internet, right? And by doing so, they can also provide statistics. So, for example, there is more movement in a certain area of the internet. Everybody's trying to attack a certain point. So, it's a network that is there to do surveillance, if you want. And consequently self-organized to provide the necessary action to stop this from happening or to prevent or to...
I think one of the very first things we have to really think about is because a blockchain it's a garbage in, garbage out, right? It's only as good as the data that a user puts into it, typically speaking, unless the algorithm is really smart enough to figure it out. But assuming for the time being that you need some human security researcher expert to identify, in fact, whether a computer has a virus or what are the files that exist in the virus or anything like this. Looking for the chat.
It disappeared every time. I need to make it fix.
So one of the ideas that comes to my mind is registered on this blockchain could be a collection of, you'd say like organizations that represent security researchers, particular groups of security researchers. And so maybe there's some kind of little extra ceremony or initiation that has to be achieved for one of these groups to get recognized on the blockchain. It has to be voted in by enough people or whatever the mechanism is that people trust this particular group to identify things that are actually viruses. After that, this group of people is tied to an actual identity. They're real people that can go and maybe be held accountable, or at least they put their name on it every time they sign that they claim some particular set of files or a virus. And from here, I think you can do something very similar to what Roberto was talking about, which is you can actually have, so if let's imagine you had 20 different security organizations that are each identifying viruses and registering them on the blockchain. If they register something that's not a virus, everybody knows who they are. Maybe there could be a majority vote to unregister the hashes of the files or something like this. So that there's an aspect of governance to deciding who exactly is allowed to put on the files. And then after that, when these viruses are identified, say if the blockchain node actually identifies it on somebody's computer who's running the blockchain node or running a piece of software that's adjacent, whatever it is, the blockchain antivirus, then you can have you can work your way into a situation where you could actually reward the security organizations who identify the viruses every time somebody actually gets a virus, potentially. Probably another architectural separation you'd have is not everybody who runs the antivirus software is going to be running a full node, right? So there has to be some point, which maybe, I don't know, but we could imagine, because running a blockchain node is quite a heavy thing, where running an antivirus in theory is supposed to be pretty light, although it'll destroy your hard drive over time as it reads every single file. So you can really imagine that some people run the blockchain nodes in this thing. Of those people, a small subset of them are groups of security researchers who actually submit new things. They're authorized to claim new things or viruses. And attached to this decentralized network are a whole lot of small user software applications that are the actual antivirus applications on those people's computers, which trust the database that they get from any node they ask in the blockchain instead of the opinion. And already in kind of 3 organizational layers, you're on your way to having a practical solution to managing antivirus hashes in the blockchain.
Interesting. One question we got is how do you use blockchain in criminal investigations? So now there are 2 phases of the same metals. One is are investigator investigating a crime that involves blockchain, for example, money paid or organization of asset distribution, or the question means how we use blockchain to help criminal investigation as a matter of well, that's I've been working implementing software for law enforcement for quite a while, and there are a lot of interesting aspects. Until things work inside a single office, obviously there is no need to work on blockchain by central server managed properly. But as soon as there are many different law enforcement units or maybe investigation that involve different countries, different then some stuff can be actually shifted in a very anonymous, in terms anonymous, not declared. It's a very complex thing. So investigation cannot put in clear information to the investigation, right? As well cannot make it accessible to anybody in a law enforcement simply because somebody can be a family member of somebody that is investigated, for example. Okay. So the mechanics for which a law enforcement investigation can proceed and can involve other law enforcement agency or enforcement agents in order to do the investigation is very complex. There is an interesting aspect.
This talk you're giving is very interesting, but it's very abstract for me. Like maybe we could think an example of a specific crime.
No, let's for example go. There are privacy issue from 2 police officers working in the same desk, where things that one should not be known from the other. Most of police officers also lives in the city where they work, so easily they can be friends of somebody being investigated by the other police officer. We are all humans, so we try to avoid. A very interesting thing is that before computers and digital archive were fully adopted, and we're not talking about many years ago because there are countries that still work on paper, it was as simple as an investigator need to get information on a criminal to see past records and other things, goes to the archive and goes to the man in the archive, says, can I have the folder for Mr. whatever. The guy of the archive says, sorry, it's not here, somebody's already using it. At this point, you know that somebody else is at least checking information on this guy. So it become a way that, do you want to know if somebody is investigated? Ask your police officer friend to ask for the folder. If the folder is there, means nobody is pretend to look at it. If the folder is not there, then there is the trigger that somebody in the police station is investigating. As soon as the information becomes digital, you open a file, you have no idea if somebody else is opening the same file. So that already raised the level of privacy and avoid situation
with computers.
Exactly. But at the same time, for an active investigation, you don't want 2 different police officers to do the same work twice. It's obvious that if there is to get information on somebody and there is an effort put there, the other police officer can benefit of the work done from the other, because many criminals are very good, so they get investigated for different crime at the same time, right? You can have done a robbery and a homicide in 2 separate occasions, and maybe people don't know is that same person, but the person investigating that, they end up to having a lot of points in common, a lot of same car license plate, same. So how would you make these people able to know that the potential is somebody else that has valid information for them inside the police office without disclosing the information? This is a very...
Now finally I see where you're going with this.
It's a very compartmentalized set of information. So there are different ways. You can say, look, anybody else that is working in the case with information that I'm working, I authorize the system to tell them that somebody else is there, or tell them my name, or only if they also say that they want to share, then tell each other about it, or tell that there is. So it's very complex, the mechanics for which things can get connected. The use of cryptography for sure has a very high value in easing these aspects, right? Because in a full folder, in a full file, there can be very different kind of information. They can be encrypted in different way. I can say only disclose this aspect.
So
but
let me see if I can put this in a little more concrete terms. Yeah, I think you've spent a lot of time working in this. It's all very obvious in your brain.
Absolutely.
But maybe not as obvious to the rest of us. So let's say that there's a lot of investigations that are open at the same time. And each of these investigations has a list of suspects, right? But the different units working on the investigations don't know the list of suspects for the other investigations.
They may even not know the other investigation going on.
They may not even know they exist, right? So we can imagine a tool that say when a suspect is being investigated, their name or some personally identifying information about them gets hashed. And this hash is put in a kind of a database of the hashes. Now this is a simplified example because
it's risky what you're saying.
There are attacks you can do on this, but just for the simplest idea. So in theory, you put the hash in the simplified version. You put the hash in this database of all the people who are under investigation, maybe with like some little tidbit of information and what it's relevant to. And when I put a new person as a suspect, I can hash that guy's name and run a scan on the hashes of all the other names of the guys who are being investigated.
You will see easily that if I want to know somebody's investigated,
you hash
just hash the name and check it.
So, but this to give kind of a simplified example of, with a few pieces of information, with a few more checks and balances to put in place like this. This is a kind of a basis for a way to try to check. Okay, is there an investigation with similar elements out there that might be connected to mine materially without you gaining any real information directly about the other investigation?
See, the solution with cryptography for this is many wraps, like an onion kind of structure around the information that is interesting, each wrap containing a piece of information of more foggy until there is the clear information. So these allow, because we go to a principle here. Once I give a piece of information to another person, like it's a piece of paper, it's a picture, or whatever, this person can make a copy. So we believe when we use cryptography to encrypt information that once the information is disclosed, there is no use to revoke the access to this information to somebody because they already have it. You shouldn't have given it in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So using these mechanics, we believe that is important though, and this is something that cryptography helps to do that cannot be done alternatively, is usually what they do, they redact pieces of paper. There is a piece of paper that has 20 pieces of information that are important on a person. I want the other party only to know 3 of them. I make a photocopy, I black out all the parts that are not important, I make another photocopy so that there is no transparency to see the text, and I hand this photocopy to the other person. Problem is that there is no guarantee that when you see another version with different redaction, it is the same document. With cryptography, you can do this.
So there's other silly just human data entry problem. One time, many years ago, I was reading a set of redacted documents, and I noticed there's a particular kind of paragraph that I'm interested in that applied several times over the set of forms, and each time it's redacted, One time they forgot.
Exactly.
I read what the paragraph
unredacted them. That would apply also to cryptography if you forget to encrypt the same word. But the point is this, that with mathematics, we can guarantee that this is the document in question, and with blockchain can guarantee the unicity, the singularity of an item. So the document is this. You cannot read it because it's encrypted with different keys in different parts. If it's a picture, even different area of the picture are encrypted in different way. But once you disclose some, so you give the decryption key for some part of the document, and the rest remain encrypted, the person can guarantee that in the moment that some correct. This is a very, very important aspect when there are addendum attachments, because in most cases, criminal investigations are managed by prosecutor in court, which can call the sheriff department, collect information, the other county department, in case a place like Italy where we have so many different, there is carabinieri, police, and many different law enforcement. He can coordinate with many other and doesn't share information between the two parties. There have been cases where two different law enforcement start investigating each other and they end up to arresting each other. Only the moment the arrest they discovered they were both law enforcement, as ridiculous as it can be, right? In the collection of information and mixing of information from several parties is a very beautiful and important aspect to be able to manage these things in a coordinated way, time-stamped way, and encrypted mechanics for which the disclosure of the information that are necessary to one team compared to the other can be done.
So already doing it this way, and I'm going to go back through a little bit slower and more detailed to make sure it's clear. So what we're talking about is the difference between, in the old way, is I want to reveal to you 3 pieces of information about somebody from a document that has their name, their phone number, their date of birth, and there's 20 pieces of information, right? So I copy the document, I redact all the lines that I don't want you to read, and I give you the document. 2 months later, you come back and you need 2 other pieces of information about this person. So I print another document and I redact all but the 5 that you need in total and give it to you, right? But now you have no way to prove that this guy's name could have been altered in the intervening time or some other piece of data that's now revealed. If, on the other hand, this document starts as a collection of several independently encrypted pieces of data. So the name is encrypted with a particular key, and the date of birth is encrypted with a particular key, and the social security number is encrypted with a particular key, and so on. Then you get this data, this file once. Somebody who wants to share with you the 3 items can give you the keys to decrypt those 3 items specifically. And in the future, in 2 months later, when you need 2 more items, all they're going to give you is the 2 extra keys that you need to the same document. And by virtue of the fact that the document you have has not changed in the meantime, and the encryption key cannot change the content that was encrypted originally, you know for a fact that nobody else has altered this document in the time.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of the use of mathematics and cryptography when managing privacy disclosure or information disclosure between many, right?
But what about when cryptography is used to commit crime? So here's another place law enforcement comes up against cryptography. Such a serious problem is it that you had things like the case a few years ago where the FBI wanted Apple to crack into a guy's iPhone, that he was suspected of some terrorist activity, and they asked Apple, hey, open this phone first, and they said, we can't. And the FBI says, why? Why can't you? And I said, because it's encrypted, because we built it so that you need to be the user, the author, and they had, even Apple themselves had left themselves no key, no back door to get into it. This problem's so serious that even today, I read about this from the 90s, but even until today, recently, the new Attorney General of the United States has gone on record saying that end-to-end encrypted communication should be banned because it makes law enforcement activity difficult. There's no way to detect what those guys were talking about if you can't get the keys.
Zoom just said that it doesn't encrypt communication unless you pay for it. Which
if you're a criminal, you should.
Exactly, correct. He raised the flag immediately. It's interesting because it makes me think to how sometime, right, the attempt to make the work easy for one end up by forbidding the other to use something else, which is a little bit inconvenient because if per se police has hard time chasing a car, so they force a car to go maximum 50 miles per hour, is that doesn't mean, I do believe that the person that wants to run away from police disobey the law because he already has a big bunch of law that he disobeyed for which the police is chasing them, and he's gonna have a car that goes much faster. So at the end they only penalize people that has committed no crime, right, in giving them a slow car. It is 50 miles per hour is pretty much the least speed limit around the United States. Let's say 30 miles to give it a good example. So the aspect of the fact that many law enforcement find themselves having a hard time reading data that is encrypted, and the sad aspect that they've been lobbying cryptographer to implement algorithms that are easy to brute force, which is something really, really bad and shocking.
Let's consider a particular fact, right? Which is that, which sometimes is obvious to us, but it's always worth stating again. So let's say that some cryptography group wants to make an encryption standard, and the FBI approaches this group and they say, hey, guys, you have to leave us a way to get into this. You have to make us a backdoor, some kind of secret way that we can decrypt the messages, but nobody else can. And then we're satisfied. In the case that we need to investigate these communications, we can. Because cryptography is purely a mathematical thing, the fact of the matter is there's no way for them to leave a backdoor for the FBI that's not also available to anybody else who wants to break into the encryption. Anybody who uses
even with
the
a
same
piece of
mechanism.
software. But the strange thing is that a piece of software can have code that says, in the case there is people
sure.
using this special thing, then make them access all the data or provide the report. Mathematics is much harder because mathematics will need, not an instruction that is code, right? So at the beginning I was skeptical on the fact that people can create a cryptography mechanics that is with a backdoor. Until I read an explanation and left me quite perplexed, and in fact...
you can do it in the mathematics.
Yes, you can do it.
You could leave a particular signature, so if you know kind of something like a private key to get all the bits to align the correct way, then it becomes trivial to brute force the message. But unless you know that set of bits, that secret key, then you're unable to brute force the cryptography.
Which is insane. I mean, I bow in front of the brain of those mathematicians that can come out with such a complex algorithm, even though at the same time when I bow, then I stand up and punch them on the face. But yes, and this make me question all the cryptography algorithms that are out and about.
There's a cleverness about this. For example, in the I think this is the SHA-256 standard. One of the things that they do, so you can imagine that when in this encryption algorithm, there's a lot of numbers that are constants, right? So kind of like very random looking numbers that get used to help jumble the bits every time. If you were going to encode a set of things that encode a very particular key, somehow when all the mathematics gets untwisted, you would have to encode that key into this set of constants, right? To enable the thing. So what they do is they use this sequence. I think it's like the cube roots of the first 64 numbers, and they take like the first 8 bits. But basically, they choose a very natural sequence that produces some kind of random noise. And the purpose of using the natural sequence is to make it obvious that nobody has selected those numbers arbitrarily. So to make it obvious that unless a secret key exists for this exact, very natural series of numbers in the universe, like you could imagine this by if you took like a expanded like pi, for example, which everybody can agree on pi, everybody can calculate it, but nobody in the universe can choose what the digits of pi were to make it fit their specific scheme. You could fill up these buffers, these constants, from the successive sets of bits from the number pi. It would be an equivalent way. In this case, they did, I think, the cube roots of the whole numbers, their prime numbers, or something like that. Just to, I think it has to be the prime numbers. If you did the cube roots of the whole numbers, then eventually you'd hit like 8, and you'd get back to 64.
That's why people is pre-calculating a lot of them in order to have an easy access.
But so the idea is that once these cryptographers were aware of the idea that a backdoor could be placed in by some kind of mathematical twisting based on some constants that they had hidden, then they made a point to choose constants that were obviously part of a natural sequence that nobody...
As always, there is not a single person that decides all this thing. There is people that stand on many different sides of the discussion, but surely enough... even mathematics cannot be trusted. Also, mathematics is an opinion at this point, which is quite sad, but true. So that's a little bit of the discussion on using blockchain for investigating crime on blockchain. cryptography being the hot topic in blockchain when it comes to crime, both for the management of data and for
And
criminal
there's I think
activities.
quite an obvious aspect that's interesting, but we didn't even bother to touch on it, which is unless you mentioned it part earlier and I missed it, which is that you can do this, I think what is called chain analysis, right? So you can, and in fact, there are some companies now that specifically their whole reason for existence is they keep a list of cryptocurrency funds or wallets that they say got their money from illegal activity. And then anytime funds move from one of those wallets to another wallet, they mark that wallet also in their system as having received funds from illegal activity. Like you can imagine this like putting the drips of dye in the water or whatever. You know, now anywhere that water transfers, it carries the color with it, and you can check. Or the marked bills, I guess, is a better example. That you mark the bills, and anywhere at the end that you find the bills, you know that these were part of some criminal
Follow the
transaction.
money.
And
Which
so-
doesn't mean that the person receiving them is a criminal.
Correct.
No,
But it means that, in fact, it doesn't even mean the person spending them is a criminal, it just means they received them from a criminal. But now that these companies exist, and if, which is a big if, they have a comprehensive, meaningful database of the people, of the funds that have been used attained in some criminal way, then that means that there are other organizations, companies, which try to make themselves compliant with regulation and law enforcement by using these services to do a due diligence check on the money that they're receiving in cryptocurrency to decide if they're actually honest money or if they came from some illegal thing. And if you send them 5 coins of Bitcoin or whatever for a service, and they go and check with this company to see where those 5 coins came from, and they determine that they originated from some kind of criminal transaction, then the company will politely say, we don't want your money, because they prefer the safety, right?
There is a market of cheaper Bitcoin, for example. Bitcoin sold at half of the price of the market because
it's
they're
marked.
dirty. And I guess at the point somebody purchasing those cannot be called innocent because you will know.
Do we check our Bitcoin before we accept it?
I have no Bitcoin,
I think
I wouldn't know. But yeah, it is interesting. It is a joint between blockchain, crime, virus, shared database, cryptography. I would say that's an interesting topic that came out.
Even without touching blockchain, cybercrime is a fascinating concept because you already, even before blockchain, you hit the concept of that something that technically is a rule. When you write a computer program, you're writing a set of rules, right? And the set of rules instructed to behave exactly a certain way. Now, if you unintentionally left a bug in the program that somebody else can exploit to cause something bad to happen, that person who exploited it gets charged as the hacker, even though really they only used the software rules that you coded. And so there's some concept which is very messy in legal terms about, say, like if my software allows somebody to enter the server, when I was writing the software, I had the intention not to let them write the server. And this other guy, simply by using the rules that I did write, but because it violated the intention that I wrote them with, he becomes the one performing an illegal activity.
I think that this goes much on the legislators.
Absolutely,
because misinterpreting intentions to make a law, it is
very...
like if I make a door, if you sneeze opens automatically, because that's the way I find convenient to enter my home. And a thief arrived to my home, sneeze, open the door, come and steal stuff. I don't think the crime is the fact that he opened the door. Probably that he came in uninvited, but if that's how the door works, probably if the door opens in front of me, it means I can enter. But stealing the data, or stealing, things from my home, that's probably the crime, independently of how he entered it, right? So I do believe that, unfortunately, a lot of people that, I think Adrian Lamo, for example, which was a friend, and he ended up being arrested for some defacing that was doing total good faith of saying, hey, New York Times, I can change the title in your own page. Why don't you protect your system a little better? And with no intention to create damage or making other use. But the scare then on the other side there is the people can do this, and the consequence that this can have push legislator to arrest and make an example of the person.
My favorite example of this was the Lulz security a couple of years ago, 2014 maybe, and they went, I forget, some big porn site they got the database of, and they released only the email addresses that ended in .gov that were registered on the website, just to embarrass the lawmakers.
I mean, like you get to use the .gov email to register. I mean, like you open Gmail and
that's why it's like at that moment, it's like they had the power to release, to embarrass anybody, to make attacks on people's, but they picked the most embarrassing part to release just to shame the people who were stupid enough to use their .gov on a porn site.
See, in Italy, the Italian police has the domain name that is poliziadistato.it, and every police officer automatically got an email from the government which is name.family name at poliziadistato.it with the password that should have changed. I mean, I just let you understand what happened, because a lot of people don't even know what an email is still there, but yet all internal communication went to those address box. Somebody started going through all the names of all the, in fact, in many email accounts you can find the list of other people's names which you can guess the other email and start trying. So those that never changed their password from password automatically had all their email leaked online, and that was a big thing. And whose fault? Is the fault of the person who didn't change his password from password, or is the fault of the person that
put the
gave
default?
But yet, you see, or is the fault of the hacker that entered somebody else's email account just because it's easy to guess?
We were just reading about the Diebold voting machines, right? The ones that these things come pre-configured. So this is the electronic voting machine that you go to cast your vote on, right? And if you in the software, it comes pre-configured with a pin for an administrator to access and go and see all the votes inside, or change them even. It's 1111 is the default. Now, the responsible polling station, upon receiving this voting machine, is supposed to set the pin, although even 4 digits of security is not particularly high. But many of them didn't, and in most of these polling stations, which are run by just average people, you could walk in and do 1111 and access everything in the voting machine. This is actually not even the most severe security breach in the Diebold software, but I leave the other one for a story another time.
Yeah, we are almost at the end of 1 hour of chit-chatting here. The question is that, illiteracy on certain things, how to handle a password, how to deploy a system, how to put something open to the online. You can still be tolerated, but for a short time, because it should be culturally open, culturally known that you don't do certain things, right? I mean, somebody that were using computer at home will know you need to connect to the internet purposely. Probably is still mechanically difficult to understand the risk, or you do mistakes that are unwilling. But my kids know by a fact how things work. If they do this mistake when they are adult in the workplace, I think it cannot be condoned. Right? If my mom does this mistake, forgive her, because she doesn't understand right how internet works in full. So there is this
and that's
shift of responsibility.
That's the groundwork for moving into the decentralized future that we talk about so much, right? Is one of the big stumbling blocks is that people, when they do everything with a private key, that's their only key to their identity, they become responsible for that thing, because nobody else can fix the situation for them if they lose the key, if it's destroyed, if it's lost, anything like this. And so in order for us to move into that decentralized future where people really authenticate themselves that way, you have to get the ingrained habit in the majority of people to manage a piece of information like this, which is not difficult to do when you make certain habits around it. But there's been no incentive for the majority of the people on the planet to develop those kind of habits. And as soon as people around the planet have those kind of habits, then adopting these kind of technologies, which put the power truly in their hands about their own data, their own finance, and whatever, it becomes accessible to them. And so it's just a learning process gradually,
Yeah. I guess that's the evolution of time. I need to be reincarnated in a new baby soon, so that I I have the chance to deploy my knowledge one more time for another 50 years. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Friday we may go online with some crazy things, but the appointment with the R&D comes next week, Monday at the same time. Don't go away. Ciao.